So whenever a new member joined the Ryse team, he was introduced to the whole team, and he had to basically introduce himself and also share some shameful secret or some shameful story to break the ice. So here's mine. Yeah, that's me. Like some 30 years ago, look at the face of happiness, was thrilled. Just imagine all the kids running around with their guns and their swords, and I had a brush and a palette. That was brilliant. So I guess that's why I never became an artist, and I just went for project management. Right? So in any case, now I don't think things can go any worse than that. So let's start. First of all, I'd like to clarify that I don't hate Agile. No matter what you hear today, I don't hate it. In fact, I really think that the whole Agile concept is the way to go. After all, accepting change and adapting to it, even though sometimes it's really difficult, I think it will always be better than trying to shy away from what I think is a universal truth, which is everything changes, right? So having a way to deal with uncertainty and with unpredictability and quickly adapting to a changing environment, well, I couldn't think of a single person that wouldn't want that. I mean, let alone a project manager. So, no, I don't hate Agile, and I don't hate Scrum or Kanban or XP or anything like that. I am, however, skeptical about how we are understanding this whole being Agile thing nowadays. So I'm not going to be sharing lots of numbers, lots of data, lots of stuff. It's more a reflection about how I feel we are not really getting what being Agile is, right? At least from my experience. So I would be very, very surprised if someone here has been in Crytek for the last 10 years and doesn't know what Agile is. But in any case, just let me do a very, 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 very short introduction. So we first introduced the turn of the century. The Agile methodologies presented an alternative to the traditional project management that was typically used in software development, right? That was waterfall or the traditional sequential development. So waterfall was inherited from the highly structured manufacturing and construction industries. And so in waterfall developments, the team had only one chance to get things right. Once the design was done, they had to move to the next thing, and they never had the chance to revisit that. That kind of makes sense in those kind of industries because, of course, costs grew exponentially. Well, basically, they became ridiculous. If you've already built half the house and you have to restart again, that just didn't make any sense, right? So the Agile methodology appeared as a natural evolution, and it was specifically designed to work in a software development environment. And what it does is it provides the opportunity to review the direction of the project throughout the whole life cycle. And this is done through time slices that are called iterations, as you all know. And at the end of those iterations, the teams must deliver something that is usable, and then basically move forward and course correct depending on the feedback that they get from whoever is their stakeholders, right? So due to its nature, that focuses on constant revision and functional product outcome, the Agile methodology is usually described as iterative and increment, right? So we have a very high-level overview. So now that we're done with that, let me give you a fun fact. This is the only slide in my presentation that has lowercase letters. So why is that? I hear some laughter there. So I don't know you, but sometimes when I'm writing about Scrum or Agile, I struggle. I say, oh, was it capital S, or was it all caps, or was it an acronym or not? Because apparently that's something very important. And actually, if you browse the internet nowadays, there's some discussion regarding whether it's Agile with a capital A or Agile with a lowercase a, right? There's basically the discussion boils down to Agile with lowercase a being a mindset, and uppercase Agile being kind of a dogma that has been created on top of that mindset. So Agile with the lowercase a it's not a process. It's not a rule set. It's just a mindset. That's all there is to it, nothing more. So it's basically some guys got together and they said, hey, when we're developing software, we've noticed that if we give something to the user earlier and he gives that feedback, the end result is a lot better. So the problem is that when Agile with lowercase a turns into this Agile thingy with uppercase A, what once were suggestions, such as maybe you should do automated tests because they might help you, they turn into you have to do automated tests. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong. You're not getting it, right? And this, to me, is one of the greatest problems that the Agile methodology is facing right now, which is that it seems like we've turned what once were sensible suggestions into basically, how would I say it, sets of rigid processes that are more often than not sold to companies as off-the-shelf products, right? So I kind of understand why this was done, because otherwise probably managers and companies, especially the most risk-allergic ones, would have never bought into it, right? It's kind of a marketing kind of thing. You wrap it in a nice paper and you say, hey, this is your process. It's going to work. But the problem is that some developers are reacting negatively to it because we are trying to basically fit Scrum as we can within our world, within our ecosystem, instead of trying to tailor it to our needs, right? So we need to ask ourselves, I don't know how many of you have had some training, some certified trainer giving you some Agile talks? So quite a few, right? My question is, when you were giving those talks, did you really feel like the trainer was actually trying to teach and promote critical thinking? Or did you feel like he was a bit trying to indoctrinate you? In my experience, at least, I felt a bit like they were trying to sell me a product, right? And I have to admit, they always say that Scrum, for example, is not a silver bullet, but when you are in those trainings, it all looks so nice. I mean, it all works, right? So let me tell you a story. I remember that one of my first contacts with Agile was a Scrum training session that my company back then organized. It was a 2-day thing. And to be honest, I think the Agile coach was really, really good. I mean, he knew his stuff. He basically ran us through the whole framework. We got, I mean, he really taught us everything we needed. And I remember that he brought some anti-stress green balls, and he was throwing that at people when asking questions, right? And after the second day, we got together in a room with our managers who had also attended those trainings. And we basically decided there and then that we were going to be Agile and we were going to do Scrum. And one of our managers had a green ball and he was tossing it at people and asking questions. So we had been completely brainwashed. So it was true. I mean, we never thought about it for a second. We just were going to be Agile. That's it. So we embraced it. We never looked back. We started doing basically planning, establishing all the planning meetings, the retrospectives, the preparing the Scrum board. So we basically were set to go. The sky's the limit. We were ready. And of course, we failed miserably. It was really painful because the team also felt like it was their fault that they were not able to pull it off. So I believe that, first of all, project managers need to understand what his environment is. So if you are in a highly reactive environment, such as a IT department, for example, or a centralized department, in those situations, probably going for frameworks that rely heavily on planning, such as Scrum, is not the best of ideas. But a different approach that is more based on priorities and urgency, well, that might work better, and it will maybe help the guys focus, and be more productive, right? The same principle would apply if you're in a very rigid environment. If you have no control over the deadline and what you need to actually deliver, there's no point in trying to be agile. It's really, really very complicated, right? So that's why we failed doing Scrum in that situation, because we didn't analyze our environment. It was at best, and I'm saying at best, 75% reactive and 25% proactive. And we really didn't have, we have little control over the deliveries and the timelines. So trying to introduce Scrum's fixed iteration model was really counterproductive, and it really didn't adapt to our environment. And it was really frustrating for the team because we didn't manage to pull it off. However, sometime afterwards, we grabbed a subset of engineers that had been working in that team, and we set them to do something completely different. So they started focusing on just developing a tool, and they had full control over it. They had full control over the schedule, they had full control over the requirements, they were able to basically meet with the stakeholders and change the priorities. And so basically they had full control over the project. And guess what? It worked. It all worked. Everything seemed to work flawlessly, and we did Agile by the book, and everyone was really happy. So my recommendation is don't go and just use Scrum because Scrum is the thing to use. Just analyze your environment. Only by having a good understanding of what your subject matter, what your problem domain is, can you make a decision on how to tackle it, right? This is not rocket science. It's basically, if I want to cut a piece of paper, I'm not going to use a hammer, right? I'll use some scissors. But in our case, I think that we were led to think that Scrum failed because we were not doing it right. And this brings us back to that kind of indoctrination problem where you say, well, when we were introduced to it, we were like, you need to do it this way. You can't do it otherwise, because then you are breaking the Scrum, or you are doing a Scrum bot. So now I don't really care, but back then, I was super scared. I mean, I don't want to be the dude that just broke the Scrum. Can you imagine? Oh my God, no. So why is that? So why do I have to bend my environment backwards to try to make it fit to a certain framework rather than the other way around? So why shouldn't I get a framework or methodology, whatever, and just adapt it to our needs? Isn't that being agile, after all? So there is nothing wrong with breaking Scrum. Should have been an artist. Check those Photoshop skills. So, for example, maybe if you have a team of 5 guys that are sitting together, they are senior guys, they've been working together for, I don't know, 5 years. Maybe they don't really need to have stand-ups. Maybe if there's no communication problem, if they know each other, if things flow naturally, why would you need to put stand-ups there? Or why would you need a Scrum Master if, as a team, you decide that you are all going to share the responsibility over implementing whatever you're trying to do? Why would you need a Scrum Master? Or if the team is really senior again, maybe you don't need to use stuff like planning poker. Again, I'm not saying you have to not do this. I'm saying just think whether you need it or not. There are, however, a couple of things that I would definitely keep, because I think they are, to me, they've been really, really useful, which is time boxing. Well, I think it's self-explanatory. We are very bad, at least I think I'm very bad at meetings. They always go along. And basically trying to fit things to a box and being really strict about that, I think that was very, very beneficial. And the other thing is retrospectives. I wouldn't, so that is another key element that I wouldn't touch, because I think they are at the heart of this critical thinking and this iterative process that we're talking about. And of course, they're key to help the team improve. So, bottom line, there's nothing wrong with changing the rules. I don't think there's anything wrong with changing the rules. Just, I think that you can say that doing Scrum is doing Agile, but sometimes doing Scrum but is being Agile. So sometimes breaking Scrum is as Agile as it gets. If you really believe that the teams are self-organizing systems, which many of the Agile experts do, you have to accept that the team's behavior is something that you just cannot predict up front. So trying to design a complete and final process from the get-go, that's just not possible. Of course, there are teams that are more likely to adapt to certain frameworks, like mature teams. But in that case, for example, as I mentioned before, maybe there's stuff in there that you don't need, like, for example, the planning poker. So once you have an understanding of your environment, what your work is, well, I've got bad news for you, which is it's going to change. So you need to understand that the project also evolves. So when I say you, sorry, I'm not English native, I mean we need to understand that the environment is destined to change as the project evolves. So the different phases of a project require different approaches. So there is basically not one process to rule them all. For example, if you're at an early prototyping phase, maybe an approach like code and fix is something that is going to be much more useful because it removes all the planning overhead and documentation and all that stuff. You just code, fix. Of course, this is super useful for prototypes where the value is not in the delivery itself, but in the lessons learned from those prototypes. On the other hand, when you're trying to close down a project, probably going from a very, very schedule-oriented process will be better because the focus has changed from trying to discover something to basically get it done, ship it. Of course, this is for traditional projects. Now with free-to-play or games as services, these things are changing a little bit. So shortly after joining Crysis 3, I found myself helping the audio team. So they had minimal management in that team up to that point, let's say none. So they were basically open for anything. They didn't have any preference, so we said, well, let's try doing Scrum, for example. But I wasn't really afraid of doing Scrum, but so I said, let's start nice and easy. So we started nice and gently. We tried to understand what their problems were. And we started by creating a backlog, having some priorities, creating a basic Scrum board, like not done, done, that's it. And we also did some light planning, let's call it, because it was just one task, one point, that's it. Nothing more complicated than that. So it all seemed to be working. We were kind of getting traction, but then at the end of the project, we started to run into a situation where the deadline, of course, became really, really pressing. And we were forced to transition to a much more schedule-oriented process. So focusing on the most important tasks and then time-boxing those and basically trying to remove anything that was low priority, of course. And the very last weeks of the project, we even started triaging the bugs and assigning them daily and managing the priorities daily because we just had to comply with that date. So thinking back on why implementing Agile for the audio team, Scrum for the audio team worked, I think that this was one of the main factors. We kept things really, really simple, and we didn't overcomplicate the process from the very beginning. In my own experience, people are very, very reactive to change. So if you try to put in place an overly complicated process, the team members will be less likely to buy into it, and you will be frustrated because then you will be playing the part of the cop that is chasing everyone and is ensuring that tasks get done, and that you play this Scrum Master a little bit. Yeah. So I would certainly start off with the minimal set of process that you need, and after some time, the team will probably start asking questions. So and finding out issues. Like, for example, hey, why do all the tasks weight the same? So I think this is a lot bigger than this one. So then you can introduce the concept of points, and say, yeah, okay, so this is a 3 and this is a 1. Or I think tasks are not granular enough. Or this one, which is my favorite one, which is that how do we plan the unexpected items? Which is like, okay, yeah, it's by their own nature, if they are unexpected and they can't be planned, right? So you can't plan those. As managers, it's something that we always try to do. For example, we tend to have buffers to cope with whatever might come up, right? So I think we need to learn to let go of this illusion of control, like Master Uguay say there. He's a wise turtle. Maybe when we start off a process, we might feel like like we're lacking information that is necessary for us, or like the information that we have is skewed. Of course, if there's one task, 1 point, the information is not really correct, it's not really accurate. But we need to relax and keep moving and change the process as we go and adapt as we go. So I would establish very few guidelines that are really easy to follow and are as non-intrusive as possible to start off. And I would let the process evolve naturally within the team. I think, to me, that's a good way to go. Again, if a team is a self-organizing system, so let's try to let the process develop in a bit more of an organic way. And of course, don't try to sell stuff to your team. Don't go and say, oh yeah, this is going to solve all your problems, because most of the team has already been in the industry a long time enough to know that there is no magic solution. So the team is probably smaller than you, so don't try to fool them. So we had left our audio guys doing Scrum and, well, trying to do Scrum, but then in came beta. Once Crysis 3 was delivered, the whole team was pulled into Ryse. And so we started with our process again. This time, since we already had some experience, we tried to be a bit more canonical about Scrum, and we just started planning properly using points and so on and so forth. We had the retrospectives, we had the burn-downs, and to be honest, there was a point where we were actually able to predict quite well how much work we were able to pull off. But then again came mid-alpha, and again we had to switch into a more and more reactive environment or mode, and again we needed to go schedule-driven, and our Scrum was blown out of the window for a second time. So does this mean that our environment was not good for Scrum? I don't think so. In fact, I know it wasn't so because it was working. The problem is that our environment was subject to change. A project is basically a living, breathing, and evolving entity. So it has different needs during its life cycle. So wouldn't it make sense to think that the way we manage it should also be different throughout those different stages? So it is inevitable that in an iterative development of a complex system such as a video game, the feedback gets more and more and more intense the more complete the development is. So these reactive situation normally appears when we are getting close to release. So instead of instead of being thrown into chaos, why not try to adapt our process so that we can deal with that change in our situation? And excuse me. Last but not least, there's the team. So the team is the key factor in choosing one way or another to work for me. And I think that sometimes as project managers, we tend to overlook it and just try to apply a certain methodology to a team just because it has already worked with a different team. So it's written in there, if you can remember, the Agile Manifesto says we are uncovering ways to develop better software by doing it and helping others do it. And by doing that, we have come to, we have come to value individuals and interaction over processes and tools. And yet, sometimes I feel like we try to enforce processes without actually taking into account the individuals. And that seems to be, to me, like a contradiction. So while working on Ryse, I also had the chance to work with a couple of different teams that were very, very different in nature to the ones I had been working with up to the moment. So I work with level designers, I work with artists, I work with cinematic designers. And I have to admit that working with them, I didn't use Scrum or Kanban or anything like that at all. For example, we had some artists, and I worked with a small team of artists on the production of the swords and the shields for the multiplayer for Ryse. And after talking to them and discussing what their approach would be, basically we came up to the conclusion that the most interesting thing for us was to use a waterfall approach. And so their main worry was really to have a clear understanding of what was assigned to them and how they were tracking against the clock, basically. So we agreed to have a weekly meeting to get together, see how things were tracking, and solve any possible issues that we might have. And of course, I was available for them in case they needed anything, but it wasn't really something super complicated. And everything went really, really smooth. Of course, the fact that these guys were really senior guys that had been working together for quite some time helped a little bit, I have to admit that. But it worked. So for the audio guys, Scrum worked. For the artists, a waterfall approach worked fine. So teams are all very different in nature and composition. So here's my question again. Wouldn't it make sense to think that the way we manage a team should be different from one team to the next? So maybe a system that works for mostly junior coders doesn't work for some senior coders, or maybe what works for some senior coders doesn't work for some artists, or maybe a different group of senior coders. There are, however, some pointers as to what kind of team would be more effective in an agile environment. Literature says that teams should be between 5 and 9. In my experience, I think 5 and 7 normally tend to work better. Even though, so this is a touchy subject. Because in Scrum, as you know, kind of like the ownership is diluted. The ownership for the result is diluted within the team, this kind of abstract thing. And so sometimes I feel like this is interpreted in a way where we favor flat structures, where some senior guys can be frustrated because they feel like they are not really taking into account, that their experience is not taken into account. And I think that's a big mistake. So everyone should have a voice. Of course, there's no question about it. But we shouldn't fall into this thing of experience doesn't count. That's very, very, that's wrong way to go, I would say. I have personally seen some frustration from some seniors coming out of being overrun by junior guys, just because there was this misunderstanding of sharing the ownership of what we're doing. And the team should also be, if possible, 100% focused on something. Normally that's not possible, so at least you should try to keep a core team that is focused on one task, one project, one feature, and then try to have some guys that are floating around and helping, right? And of course, cross-functional teams are the bread and butter of Agile. In our case, for example, during Ryse, we had many issues with the dependencies, not only for the audit department, but between all the departments. And I think this was basically caused because we had a very functional, well, discipline-oriented structure. So we had discipline silos, programmers, artists, animators. And of course, there are ways to work around that. So you can have high-level waterfalls, so that basically you can distribute the work between those teams. You can have you can actually prioritize the dependencies first, so that those get resolved earlier, and no one is standing blocked. But to me, what work better are these guys, are the cross-functional team, because to me, cross-functional teams could have helped us avoiding this issue, because the most obvious benefit of these teams is that they turn all the external dependencies into internal dependencies, which are a lot easier to resolve. So as an immediate result, the backlogs become less complicated, and management can focus a little bit more on actually trying to push the quality for once, and not just worrying about coordinating people here and there, right? For example, when working on Ryse on the scripted events, we had this kind of setup, and it worked really well. We had cinematic designers, we had the animators, we had the audio guys. They were all working off the same backlog and sending tasks around as needed based on an automated workflow that we set up. And to be honest, in terms of coordination, the level of supervision that was required from me was basically down to zero. So, and if we talk about teams, I'd like to really have a small note about this guy, about the manager. So the project manager, the way I understand it is that he's not the boss of the team. Sometimes we are given a lot of power, and Spider-Man. With a lot of power comes great responsibility, or something like that, right? So I've always believed that a project manager is just another guy in the team. The only thing is that he's doing something different. It's that guy. So he's in the same boat. He's in the same team. He's just one guy that, well, he doesn't have any roles, but that's it. So my understanding is that as a project manager, what you need to do is to help your team work as a unit and deliver to the highest of their capability. So helping them, it's not bossing, it's not dictating. So your team members are the experts. They know their job. So some of them have been doing this for ages, so they know how to do stuff. Just talk to them, just find out what's worrying them, what the problems are, and just try to see what you can do to make their lives easier. So if you attended this talk with hopes that I was going to present you the next big thing in project management methodologies, I'm sorry, but it's something that I cannot give you. As a project manager, I don't believe in one methodology or the other. So I try to understand what the strengths of those methodologies are, and then try to adapt them so that to what the project and the team requires. So there is not one way to do things. There is not one silver bullet. So knowing Scrum is definitely something positive, but having an understanding of other approaches, such as, I don't know, rapid application development or XP or Kanban, that will provide you with a much more complete toolbox to solve your problems. So the key here is to shift our mentality from what methodology should I use to how can I solve the problem at hand with the tools that I am given. So to me, that's basically it. There are, however, some common sense principles that I believe one must apply no matter what, which are prioritization. This is like the key good quality for good. This is the key that a good manager needs to have, or the quality that a good manager needs to have, and it's prioritization. We need to be able to put the stress in the elements that need it and get those done first, right? We need to be able to direct the focus of our team so that we get the most out of our work. The second one is pragmatism. And I think that's really what this whole talk revolves around. When faced with a problem, we need to be really practical about it. So physical problems cannot be solved abstractly. For example, if you think of a machine like these big machines in factories, they have lots of different weird pieces and moving parts. All of those weird pieces have been designed with one specific objective in mind. So each of our solutions should be designed to give a specific solution to a specific problem. And then, Mr. Van Damme, we need to be able to do splits. So flexibility, of course. Flexibility in this case applies to our ability to switch the strategies when our current one is not working. So sometimes there are bumps on the road, and we can overcome them just by brute force, but sometimes those bumps are so big that really they are hindering the project. So it's better to, let's say, switch our strategy and try to adapt to that rather than risking the project because we want to stick with whatever we're already doing. And we're basically done. That was fast. Damn. So I spent some time thinking, like, what can I put in my last slide? I had already used Van Damme, so it was a good option, but I couldn't use it again. And then I thought, I've always been a big fan of this guy. And then suddenly I remembered a talk that, well, a quote that he had on TV. So to me, this is the first Agile guy. Not in a split sense, but in his mentality. He basically took, doing martial arts, instead of going and saying, hey, I'm going to do Kung Fu, or I'm going to do karate, he said, hey, I'm going to study Kung Fu, and I'm going to study karate, and I'm going to study Chinese boxing, because I'm going to take what I can from those and use it when I need it, right? The quote was, he said something like, be shapeless, formless, like water. If you pour water into a bottle, it becomes a bottle. You pour water into a cup, it becomes a cup. You pour water into a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Be water, my friend, right? Be agile. So know your environment. Determine what your needs are. Don't do things by the book unless it really makes sense to you. And don't be afraid to break the rules. A rigid process is basically the complete opposite of being agile. Be aware of the stage your project is on and what the focus is, and try to adapt to that to better deliver your goals. And of course, know your team. Work together with them. Work with them to come up with a process that makes sense for all of you. And don't be afraid to try out and experiment and evaluate and start again. And over time, you'll all figure together what really works for you. So be flexible, be adaptive, at all levels, but above all, just be agile, but with a lowercase a. Thanks a lot. So I believe we still have a bit of time. So if you have any questions, anything you want to ask, want to discuss, please. Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
How many people were working on Ryse at its peak, and what was the ratio of production people to people working in other disciplines?
So at its peak in the office, I think we must have been around 200 people, something like that, because there was like the core Ryse team, and then there was also the Crysis 3 team that when it was finished, it basically jumped on board to help deliver the project. Because as you know, delivering these kind of cheap day one titles is kind of tricky. And managers, we had quite a few. Some of them left. I think, let me just do a quick count. We must have been like 15, something like that, roughly.
Thanks.
Cool.
Hi. I'm an academic, and
Yes.
I'm curious as your opinion about students participating in agile development in school. Should it be a more formal, rigid exposure to that, or should it be more like the small A, learning how to work in an agile framework?
Personally, this is so. The question is whether in an academic environment, students should be focusing more on the by-the-book agile, or trying to go more on the soft agile, lowercase a agile. Personally, I think it would be to go on the lowercase, because my opinion is that what's important is your mindset, is the way you approach it's the way you approach problems. So it's basically, it's like math. When you learn math, you are not learning just to solve one thing. You learn a set of rules, and then that can be used to solve whatever. So that, I would definitely go for the softer approach. That would be my goal.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think, yeah, over there.
Hi,
Hi.
Rory Abbott from Riot Games. Thanks for your talk. It's very
Yep.
informative. You mentioned when you transitioned to Ryse, you took on Scrum by the book with those teams.
Yeah.
But then you mentioned that the deadline came along and you abandoned that for
Yeah.
a more scheduled approach.
Yeah.
So vanilla Scrum offers techniques for hitting a given functionality by a fixed date. Did you not consider using those, and did the scheduling option give you the accuracy you needed?
Well, basically, what we found out is that it was not only that the date was really pressing. It was also that suddenly we were not really able to plan things, because there were lots of things popping up everywhere. There were lots of fires. Of course, at the end of the project, we got more and more and more and more bugs. So we tried to plan to do something, and then that plan, either we kept it and then we disregarded all those things that popped up, which was not good, or else it just was useless because we never were able to basically follow it. So I think that maybe if we had switched to something more like Kanban, for example, that would have been a better approach towards the end of the project.
So your traditional schedule approach didn't work either, or?
It worked, but it had its flaws, because basically when you go to schedule mode, you just go like, yeah, well, this is the time we have and this is what we need to do. So you start dropping quality on some of the items, and sometimes when you don't want to lose quality, then it's a bit of a pickle, especially when you have highly motivated teams that really want to get things done. Sometimes you just have to send them home because they want to finish it, and they keep asking you for tasks. Hey, can you put another task for me, because I want to give another pass to that, and you have to actually say, no, I can't do that, I can't do that. So it wasn't ideal. I don't think there's anything works like perfectly.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
This is something our studio is grappling with. We're trying to go agile, but we're dealing with a lot of inconsistencies. So I appreciate what you're saying about the flexibility. I'm wondering if after a period of time you're coming up with a consistent flexibility so you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, or do you because the personalities are different in each team?
So, for example, with the audio team, I wasn't really reinventing the wheel. I was basically using Scrum. But what I did is I didn't say, hey, let's use Scrum, and then basically have everyone and then set up all the meetings and have everyone planning properly and stuff like that. What I did is I say, hey, maybe we could use this. What do you think? The guy said, yeah, it looks like a good idea. So we introduced it really, really slowly and gently so that they were not afraid of it. So it's not really reinventing the wheel every time. It's just trying to ease the teams into the process. I think that's the key.
So getting their input.
Sorry?
Getting their input.
Exactly. I think that's really important. I think that you touched a really interesting subject, because I think that it's really, really important to have the buy-in from the team. They need to feel like they are not doing that just because you want them to do it. They need to feel like, actually, yeah, well, okay, this is something that, yeah, we don't know exactly how many tasks we have to do, and yeah, we don't know exactly how much we can do. So yeah, if you know something that, yeah, well, maybe we could use this, right? So, yeah.
By the way, I really like your slides.
Oh, thanks a lot. I put lots of time on that. It's horrible. Anyone else? Oh, I see a gentleman running the mic.
Yeah, hi.
Hey.
First, really good talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Well, on my case, I think that hearing you say that you started taking Scrum by the book, and that kind of put you off track and on the project, it kind of worries me, because I'm currently on the same stage. I started implementing because we're a really small studio, and we're trying to implement Scrum, but exactly that's what's happening. It's like creating some, we're implementing it like on the book, but we don't really have that much time to start playing with the things. So what will be like the core things that you'll suggest that you should look into the most?
That's a tough one. So I've been talking for almost an hour saying, yo, you need to know your environment and know everything, and then you can do things. And now you're asking me to wait. Give me a solution. What can I focus on? I don't know. I really need to have a better understanding, so I don't want to give you any wrong cue. But definitely try to. So first thing, prioritize. Make sure that you are putting the effort where you have to put it, and try to eliminate as much waste as possible. So if you feel like there's some things that are not really needed, just try to cut on those. But it's really difficult, because not knowing exactly what the big picture is, it's a bit complicated to answer that question.
Thank you.
We can chat later a little more if you want. Yes.
Hi, thanks for the speech.
Thanks.
We're using applied Scrum, and it works well for us. But then again, I have to deal with external teams which are using waterfall. And they are extremely rigid, and our collaboration is not going so well. So do you have any pointers? What could I do?
What's the relationship between you and those other teams? Are there?
They are all subcontractors.
They are subcontractors.
Yeah.
So you're basically their client.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're paying them for the work.
Okay. And how is it causing issues for you?
Well, I said that we're trying to do our work iteratively. So we experiment with stuff and then fix it again and so forth. But they need to have everything set up for the year and a half, almost sometimes. And then if anything changes, they just drop their tools, and we cannot do anything. So we have to be really look forward to know what we are doing, and sometimes when we go, oh, we should have done that or this and that instead, and then try to figure out a way how to deal with them. So that's kind of
Yeah.
problem.
So the thing is that even if you're doing Scrum, you should have an understanding of what your kind of releases are and what you are going to be delivering. At least the way I see it is, basically, I need to have like my release plan. Basically, I need to know where I'm delivering things, and then that is what I'm grabbing and then putting into my sprints, and that's what I'm delivering. And then the plan changes accordingly, but they need to adapt to you. I mean, it's really weird because you're the client, so
yeah, it is
basically
really weird,
it's like, well, dude, we're paying you to do this, so
yeah,
so I assume they have to get some kind of heads up, of course. So I would definitely try to focus a little bit on trying to get. Maybe they don't need 1 year predictability, right? But maybe if you can give them like 2 months, which is not a very, very far away future, I think that could work. Because personally, I have a lot of trouble when I try to see like releases for 1 year or something like that. It all becomes really blurry after a couple of weeks, a couple of months. It all becomes really fluffy. So I would try to agree with them on shorter term plans, and they can do kind of mini waterfalls instead of having this huge plan. They can just do waterfalls for a couple of months, and then maybe you can sync with them.
all right.
Could
Thanks.
be. Thanks. So I think there's no one else. I can't see anyone rushing the microphone. Cool. So thank you very much again, guys, for joining me this afternoon. It's been a pleasure. And have a safe trip home, everyone.